The grand halls of the Jaren war camp were filled with towering alien warriors, their armor gleaming under the artificial lights. They stood in a massive circle, their piercing eyes fixed on the center where two figures faced each other. One was General Kyra, a Jaren elite warrior, and the other was a human officer, Commander Rylan Graves. Kyra's golden eyes narrowed as she crossed her arms. "Is this really the best your species has to offer?" she said with a smirk, her voice dripping with arrogance. The Jarens were a race bred for war, taller, stronger, and faster than humans. To them, humans were weak, unfit for real combat. The crowd of alien warriors laughed, their deep voices echoing through the hall. Rylan, standing firm, didn't react. He had heard it all before. Humans were always underestimated in the galaxy. But he knew something they didn't. Kyra took a step forward. "I challenge you, human," she declared. "A duel, hand-to-hand combat. No weapons, no armor, just strength." The laughter from the crowd grew louder. To them, this was a joke. Kyra was a Jaren champion, undefeated in hundreds of battles. The idea of a human beating her was unthinkable. But Rylan didn't hesitate. He nodded. "I accept." A hush fell over the crowd. The Jarens had expected him to refuse or ask for a blaster fight. No one expected him to step forward so confidently. "You have a death wish, human." Kyra raised an eyebrow. Rylan smiled. "No, I just don't like backing down." The Jarens exchanged glances. This was unexpected. They had seen humans fight before, but never one who willingly stepped into the ring against a warrior like Kyra. Kyra removed her armor plates, revealing her muscular frame, covered in deep scars from past battles. She was twice as strong as any human, and she knew it. Rylan took off his jacket, cracking his knuckles. He wasn't as physically imposing, but he had something else: technique, experience, and human adaptability. The duel was set. The Jaren warriors roared in excitement, placing their bets. Some cheered for Kyra, some just laughed at Rylan. No one thought the human had a chance. But Rylan had fought against tougher odds before. As the circle of warriors tightened around them, Kyra smirked. "Try not to break too quickly, human." Rylan just shrugged. "We'll see." The crowd chanted. The battle was about to begin, and no one knew just how shocking the outcome would be. The air in the war camp was thick with anticipation. Jaren warriors crowded around the fighting circle, eager to witness the so-called duel. To them, this was no real fight. It was a lesson in humiliation. General Kyra stretched her arms, rolling her shoulders. Her muscles flexed, her golden skin glowing under the artificial lights. She towered over Rylan, her frame twice as wide, her strength unmatched among her kind. "You should reconsider," she said, her voice calm but mocking. "I would hate to break something important." Rylan simply smirked, rolling his neck. "Don't worry about me." A deep drum-like sound echoed through the hall, a Jaren war signal. The duel had begun. Kyra lunged forward with terrifying speed, her powerful fist swinging straight for Rylan's head. But she missed. Rylan had already moved. He sidestepped, fluid and fast, letting her fist slice through empty air. The Jaren crowd fell silent for a second before roaring with laughter. They thought Kyra was playing with him. She frowned. That was unexpected. This time, she used both hands, aiming to grab and crush him. Her speed was incredible, but Rylan was faster than they expected. He ducked under her reach, spinning around her larger frame, his movements precise. Kyra's eyes narrowed. She wasn't playing anymore. She lashed out with a powerful kick, enough to break bones, but Rylan blocked it, not directly, but by deflecting her momentum, making her step back awkwardly. The crowd murmured. This wasn't normal. Humans weren't supposed to be this fast. Rylan grinned. "That all you got?" Kyra's pride burned. She charged at full speed, trying to tackle them. If she got him in her grip, it would be over. But as her arms reached him, He dropped low. Using her own momentum against her, Ryland spun, twisting around her leg, and slammed his elbow into the back of her knee. Kyra stumbled. The great Sharon warrior, stumbling against a human. The crowd fell into silence. They had never seen anything like this before. Kyra growled, her golden eyes flashing. She was done playing games. She launched a series of brutal attacks. Punches, kicks, sweeps. But Ryland dodged, deflected, countered. Every move she made, he read it like a book. Gerons were strong, but humans were strategic. Ryland wasn't fighting with raw strength. He was using timing, leverage, and skill. And Kara was starting to realize it. With one final attack, she swung at him. But he caught her wrist. A human, catching Geron's attack. The crowd gasped. Kyra's heart pounded. She had never fought anyone like this. And for the first time, she wasn't sure she would win. The fighting circle was silent. The once laughing Geron warriors now watched with wide eyes, their amusement replaced with disbelief. A human had caught a Geron warrior's attack. Kyra's golden eyes locked onto Ryland's hand, gripping her wrist. Her muscles tensed, expecting him to let go. Instead, he held firm, his strength far greater than she imagined. With a sharp twist, Ryland redirected her momentum, forcing her off balance. Kyra gritted her teeth and pulled back, freeing herself, but her pride took a hit. This wasn't possible. Humans weren't supposed to be this strong. "You're faster than I thought," Kyra admitted, shaking out her wrist. "Stronger, too. But let's see if you can handle this." With a burst of explosive speed, she leaped forward, her fists coming down like hammers. Ryland moved instinctively. Instead of blocking, he sidestepped again, avoiding her attacks by inches. He could feel the wind pressure of her strikes. They were powerful enough to break bones. But power was nothing without control. Kyra swung again, but Ryland ducked under her massive arm, rolling behind her. He struck. A quick, controlled jab to her ribs. Not enough to injure her, but enough to shock her system. Kyra staggered back, a rare moment of vulnerability for the feared Geron warrior. The crowd gasped. Had a human just landed a hit on their strongest general? Kyra growled, her face darkening. This had never happened before. She charged again, this time faking a right hook before switching to a low kick, aiming for Ryland's legs. But he saw it coming. Instead of dodging, he stepped into it, blocking with his shin, absorbing the impact without flinching. Kyra's eyes widened. No one took a hit from her and stayed standing. And then Ryland attacked. Using the moment of surprise, he launched a rapid counter, 2 sharp punches to her side, and a spinning back kick to her abdomen. The kick landed hard. Kyra stumbled backward, her breath catching. She barely caught herself before falling. A Geron warrior, nearly knocked down by a human. The crowd was in shock. For the first time in her life, Kyra felt something strange. Doubt. She clenched her fists, her pride screaming at her to crush this human. But another part of her, the warrior's instinct, was starting to recognize the truth. Ryland wasn't just lucky. He was a fighter, a real one. She wiped her mouth, then smirked at him, a new fire in her eyes. "Interesting," she muttered. Ryland simply raised an eyebrow. "Now you're taking me seriously." Kyra rolled her shoulders. "Now, human, I actually want to fight you." The real battle was just beginning. The atmosphere in the Geron war camp had completely changed. At the start, the warriors had laughed, thinking this duel was nothing more than a joke, a human stepping into the ring with a Geron champion. Impossible. But now, they watched in stunned silence, their eyes locked on Ryland Graves, the human who refused to fall. Kyra exhaled slowly, her heart pounding. This was not how she had expected the fight to go. She had assumed this human would crumble under her power, but instead, he was matching her step for step. She flexed her fingers, feeling the dull ache in her ribs where his kick had landed. This fight just got interesting. she muttered under her breath. Rylan, standing across from her, smirked. Took you long enough to notice. The Jaren crowd stirred, whispering among themselves. No one had ever seen Kyra challenged like this. Kyra rolled her shoulders. No more games, human. Let's end this. Without warning, she rushed forward, her speed blinding. This time, Rylan didn't dodge. He met her head-on. The impact shook the arena, the force sending a shockwave through the gathered warriors. Kyra threw a powerful punch, but Rylan caught her arm, twisting at the last moment to throw her off balance. She spun, recovering instantly, launching a knee strike toward his ribs. Rylan barely dodged. The attack grazed him, and he felt the sheer force behind it. If that had hit cleanly, he would have been done. But he wasn't out yet. Using her own movement against her, Rylan grabbed her arm and spun behind her, locking her in a tight hold. Kyra gritted her teeth. The human was fast, precise, and impossibly strong for his size. She struggled, trying to break free, but Rylan held firm. For the first time in her life, she realized she was at a disadvantage. The warriors watching held their breath. No one had ever caught Kyra like this before. Kyra snarled, slamming her elbow backward. Rylan released her at the last second, avoiding the hit, but she spun around, aiming a devastating kick at his chest. This time, she connected. Rylan was sent flying, hitting the ground hard. The crowd roared, but not in mockery. They were invested now. Rylan coughed, wiping his mouth. Then he did something that made Kyra freeze. He smiled. Despite taking that hit, he still had fight left in him. Kyra's heart pounded. Was she enjoying this? She clenched her fists. This was no longer about proving human weakness. This was about fighting a worthy opponent. And for the first time, Kyra felt something strange. Excitement. The real battle had only just begun. The air in the war camp was electric. The duel had gone far beyond what anyone expected. What started as a simple challenge to humiliate a human had turned into a true battle, one that had the Jaren warriors watching in awe and disbelief. Kyra wiped her mouth, her golden eyes locked onto Rylan. He was still standing. She had hit him hard, hard enough to break bones. Any normal opponent would have stayed down. But this human, he smiled. Rylan rolled his shoulders, exhaling slowly. His ribs ached, his body was sore, but his adrenaline was pumping. You hit hard, he admitted, smirking. I'll give you that. Kyra narrowed her eyes. Something about the way he kept getting back up made her heart race in a way she didn't expect. This fight wasn't going as planned. She clenched her fists, her warrior instincts burning. I'll make sure you don't get up this time. With a powerful battle cry, she charged forward, her muscles tightening as she prepared for a final, crushing blow. The crowd roared, sensing the end. But Rylan was ready. As Kyra swung at him with all her strength, Rylan did something no one expected. Instead of dodging, he stepped in closer, too close for her to adjust. In a blink, he locked his arms around her midsection and twisted his body. The movement was fast, precise, and unstoppable. Before she realized what was happening, Kyra was lifted off her feet. The great Jaren warrior was airborne for the first time in her life. And then, she hit the ground. Hard. The camp fell into complete silence. Kyra lay flat on her back, blinking up at the ceiling in utter shock. A human had thrown her to the ground. She tried to get up, but before she could, Rylan was already over her, pinning her down with expert precision. His grip was solid, unbreakable. For the first time in her life, Kyra couldn't move. The realization hit her like a punch to the chest. She had lost. The great General Kyra, the undefeated champion of the Jaren warriors, had been defeated by a human. Rylan met her gaze, his breathing heavy. He wasn't gloating. Instead, he simply said, "Yield." The crowd held their breath. Kyra's heart pounded. Her pride screamed at her to keep fighting. to deny the truth. But deep down she knew. She had been bested. Slowly, her fingers curled into fists, then relaxed. She exhaled. I yield. The camp erupted into chaos. Warriors shouted, some in rage, some in awe. But Kyra, she just lay there, staring at the human who had done the impossible. And for the first time, she felt respect. The Jaren war camp had never been this silent before. Hundreds of warriors stood frozen, their golden eyes locked on General Kyra, their strongest warrior, lying defeated on the ground beneath a human. No one spoke. No one moved. It was as if the entire world had stopped. Rylan released his grip on Kyra and stood up. His breathing was heavy, his body aching from the battle, but he remained calm. He wasn't laughing, wasn't mocking her. He simply stood tall and unshaken. He had won, and everyone knew it. Kyra slowly sat up, her heart pounding. She had lost. A Jaren warrior's pride was everything. Strength meant honor, respect, power, and she had just been defeated by a human in front of her entire species. She clenched her fists, expecting to feel rage, but something else filled her instead. Respect. She looked up at Rylan, studying him in a way she hadn't before. He was different from other warriors. He didn't fight for ego or dominance. He fought with precision, strategy, and endurance. Most of all, he fought with purpose. Kyra took a deep breath and slowly rose to her feet. The crowd still hadn't made a sound, waiting for what she would do next. She could have denied it. She could have said it was a mistake, a trick, an accident. But she wasn't a coward. With a firm, steady voice, she spoke. "This human is stronger than I thought." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Warriors turned to each other, whispering in disbelief. Kyra wasn't angry. She wasn't challenging the result. She was accepting it. She stepped forward, standing face to face with Rylan. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. Then, she extended her hand. The crowd sucked in a breath. A Jaren warrior never offered a handshake to an outsider. It was a sign of deep respect, one that was only given to equals. Rylan looked at her hand, then smiled and shook it. The camp erupted into noise. Some warriors cheered, others shouted in frustration. But the tension had shifted. Kyra turned back to the gathered warriors and raised her voice. "This human has proven himself. He is no weakling. He is a true warrior." The warriors hesitated, but then, one by one, they began to nod. Rylan had earned their respect. The duel was over. But Kyra had the feeling this was only the beginning. She smirked at Rylan. "I won't lose next time." Rylan chuckled. "We'll see about that." And just like that, a new legend was born. The Jaren warriors had slowly begun to scatter, leaving the central fighting circle. Their murmurs were filled with shock and awe, and many of them were still processing what had just happened. The news of General Kyra's defeat would spread across the entire war camp, but no one would believe it until they saw it with their own eyes. Kyra stood at the edge of the circle, her eyes focused on the ground. Her pride had been wounded. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about victory or strength. She was thinking about something else. Respect. Rylan Graves, the human who had just bested her, who had shown the entire camp that humans were capable of far more than their size and strength suggested. She hadn't expected to feel this way. She had always been confident in her abilities, never thinking anyone, let alone a human, could challenge her. But Rylan wasn't like the others. He wasn't just a fighter. He was a strategist. He had used his intelligence, timing, and calm under pressure to win. Kyra's mind raced. Could a human truly be this strong? The answer was simple, yes. She had felt the sharpness of his strikes, the power behind his movements, and she knew that if he hadn't been holding back, if he had truly unleashed everything he had, she would have been on the ground much earlier. Rylan had stood over her at the end of the duel, his face calm, almost humble. Not once had he gloated. As she stood alone, Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Kyra turned, and there he was, Ryland Graves, walking toward her with a slight smile on his face. "I don't think you're going to like this," he said, his voice light, "but I believe you owe me a drink." Kyra raised an eyebrow, looking at him with a mix of annoyance and amusement. "You want a drink, human?" "Well, I did just win the duel," Ryland said, shrugging. "Seems fair to me." Kyra's lips twitched into a small smile, a rare expression for someone who had always been serious about battle. But the smile quickly faded. "I should have crushed you," she muttered, looking at the ground again. "I should have shown everyone that no one beats a Sharon in combat." Ryland's smile faded, but his tone softened. "You're a warrior, Kyra, and there's no shame in losing to someone who fights with honor." Kyra's gaze met his, and for the first time, there was no arrogance in her eyes, just respect. "No, there isn't," she admitted, her voice quiet. A strange silence hung in the air between them, an understanding passing from one to the other. Ryland had earned her respect, but something more had begun to stir inside her. Ryland gave a small nod, clearly pleased by the change in her tone. "I guess I'm not so bad for a human, huh?" Kyra smirked again, but there was no bitterness in it this time. "I never said you were. I just didn't know what to expect. Next time, though," she paused, her golden eyes locking onto his, "I will defeat you." Ryland chuckled. "We'll see about that." As the warriors began to disperse, Kyra and Ryland stood side by side, their rivalry still strong. But now there was a new respect between them. The duel had changed everything. And the future? It was uncertain. The news of Kyra's defeat spread quickly across the Jaren Empire. What had started as a simple duel between a human and a Jaren warrior had turned into a tale of unexpected respect and mutual recognition. Warriors who had once looked down on humans began to reconsider their views. Ryland Graves was no longer seen as just a human officer. He had earned the respect of the fiercest warriors in the galaxy. And Kyra, she had changed. In the days following the duel, Kyra began to spend more time with Ryland. She'd never admit it out loud, but she was starting to appreciate the calm strength the human possessed. His ability to remain composed in the face of danger had made her see him as more than just an outsider. He was a warrior in his own right, and she could learn from him. One afternoon, as they walked through the training grounds, Kyra glanced at him. "Tell me, Ryland," she said, her voice unusually soft. "How do humans fight so differently?" Ryland looked over at her, a hint of surprise crossing his face. "What do you mean?" "I've fought many opponents, but your style is—" She trailed off, searching for the right words. "It's not about brute strength. It's about adapting, about making the most of what you have." Ryland smiled. "Humans are adaptable. We have to be. We don't have the raw power that others do, but we make up for it with creativity and thinking on our feet." Kyra nodded slowly, her mind working. She was starting to see what made humans dangerous in their own way. They weren't just survivors. They were innovators. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a group of Jaren soldiers. They bowed respectfully to Kyra, but their gaze lingered on Ryland, still uncertain about the human's place among them. Kyra noticed the hesitation and stepped forward. "This human is no different from any of you," she said, her voice firm. "He is a warrior. If you doubt that, I suggest you face him in combat. He will show you what humans are capable of." The soldiers hesitated for a moment, but then nodded, clearly respecting Kyra's words. Ryland looked at Kyra, his smile returning. "You sure about this? I didn't think I'd be facing more Jaren warriors so soon." Kyra smirked. "I'm sure, but you will have to prove yourself to everyone, even me." Ryland raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. He stepped into the ring, the warriors following. The training grounds grew quiet, all eyes on the human who had taken down their champion. The duel began, and Ryland fought as he had before, precise, calculated, and full of surprises. He didn't overpower his opponents with sheer force, But he used their strengths against them, maneuvering with agility and strategy. The Jaren warriors, one by one, were taken down. They were fast, strong, but Rylan was faster, and his unpredictability left them unable to anticipate his next move. By the end, Rylan stood victorious once more. He wiped sweat from his brow and looked up at Kyra. "Well, I guess you were right," he said, grinning. "I'm a warrior after all." Kyra watched him with a mix of admiration and something else, something she hadn't expected. "You are," she said quietly. "And now, I believe we have a future alliance." For the first time since the duel, Kyra didn't feel like a defeated warrior. She felt like a woman who had discovered something far more important than victory. She had found an ally in a human, and that, she realized, was more valuable than anything. The days following Rylan's victory over the Jaren warriors passed quickly. The atmosphere in the war camp was different now, charged with a new sense of possibility. The warriors no longer looked at humans with disdain. Instead, they were starting to see them as equals. Kyra walked through the camp, her thoughts occupied by everything that had changed. Her defeat had been difficult, yes, but it had forced her to reevaluate everything she had believed about humans. She had always thought of them as weak, fragile creatures who couldn't possibly stand against the strength of the Jaren people. But now she knew better. Rylan had shown her something she hadn't expected. Strength wasn't just physical power. It was about resilience, adaptability, and the ability to think under pressure. As Kyra walked, her steps slowed. She caught sight of Rylan ahead, standing by the training grounds, watching as some of the younger warriors sparred. He was an outsider, yes, but he had become part of the fabric of the camp. The warriors treated him differently now, no longer as a curiosity, but as a true warrior. Kyra approached him, and Rylan turned with a smile. "Hey, Kyra, you look deep in thought. What's on your mind?" She stopped in front of him, her eyes studying him for a moment. "A lot has changed, Rylan." "I know. It feels like the whole camp is different." Kyra nodded. "You've done something no one thought possible. You've shown them what humanity is capable of. And because of you, the Jaren warriors are starting to see humans as partners, not just subordinates." Rylan's smile widened. "I just did what I had to do. I never imagined it would change so much." Kyra's gaze softened. "That's because you didn't just win a duel, Rylan. You won their respect, and you've earned mine as well." Rylan chuckled, but there was sincerity in his eyes. "I'm glad to hear that. But it wasn't just me. You've been a big part of all this too. Without your support, none of this would have been possible." Kyra looked at him, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "It seems we've both changed." Rylan nodded, his gaze drifting to the warriors in the training ring. "Yeah, we've both learned a lot from each other." It was true. Kyra had learned about patience and resilience, while Rylan had learned to appreciate the strength and honor of the Jaren people. Kyra turned back toward the camp, a new sense of purpose settling within her. "I'm starting to think that maybe, just maybe, humans and Jarens have more to offer each other than we ever imagined." Rylan followed her gaze, his eyes bright with hope. "I couldn't agree more." Kyra glanced at him, her golden eyes glowing with determination. "You know, Rylan, this is only the beginning. What if the future of our species isn't about fighting each other, but about working together?" Rylan's smile was warm. "I like the sound of that." Kyra's thoughts wandered to the future. She had always believed that strength was the only thing that mattered. But now she saw that the future was about building something together, about creating alliances and finding common ground between people who were once enemies. Kyra and Rylan had already proven that anything was possible. And now, together, they would change the galaxy. The Jaren Empire was forever changed. What had once been a world dominated by strength and pride was now shifting towards something greater, a place where respect and understanding began to take root. All because of one unexpected duel between a human and a Jaren warrior. Rylan Graves, The human who had won the impossible duel stood in front of a large window overlooking the Empire's main city. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow across the skyline. The camp was quieter than usual, but there was a palpable energy in the air, a sense of something new beginning. He turned, glancing over his shoulder as Kyra entered the room. Her usual confident stride was still there, but there was a new kind of respect between them, one built on shared experiences, not just battle. "I've been thinking," Ryland said as Kyra approached him. "Do you remember when you first challenged me?" Kyra nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "I do. You looked so sure of yourself. I didn't think it would end the way it did." Ryland laughed, but there was a hint of pride in his voice. "Neither did I, to be honest. I didn't think I'd actually have to face someone like you." Kyra raised an eyebrow, her smirk widening. "And what exactly do you mean by that?" He turned fully to face her, his smile still there. "I mean, you're tough, tougher than I thought possible. You taught me that strength isn't just about power. It's about adaptability and strategy." Kyra chuckled softly, looking at him with genuine respect. "And you taught me that humans aren't just weaklings to be tossed aside. You fight with honor, something I can appreciate." For a long moment, the two warriors stood in silence, their eyes meeting. The duel had been more than just a physical contest. It had opened their eyes to a new kind of partnership. The quiet was broken by the sound of footsteps approaching. They turned to see a group of Jaren officers entering the room. They were all looking at Ryland with a new respect in their eyes. One of the officers, a tall warrior with silver markings on his skin, spoke. "Commander Graves, we would like to speak with you." Ryland nodded, motioning for them to continue. The officers stood in a semicircle around him. "You've changed our views on humanity," the officer continued. "We never thought a human could have the strength or honor to match our warriors. But now we know better." Kyra stepped forward, her voice clear. "This is the future. Humans and Jarens working together, not as enemies, but as allies." The officers exchanged looks, then bowed their heads in agreement. "We will honor that," the officer said. "You have earned our respect, Graves, and we believe this partnership can change the galaxy." Ryland smiled, a weight lifting off his shoulders. He glanced at Kyra, her eyes filled with determination and confidence. The bond they had formed, through strength and understanding, was stronger than either of them had imagined. Ryland nodded. "I couldn't agree more." And so, the story of the duel became a legend, one that would be told across the galaxy for years to come. It wasn't just a tale of a human besting a Jaren. It was the story of two enemies who became allies, proving that respect, honor, and partnership could change the course of history. The human and the Jaren, standing side by side, had created a future where both their species could thrive together. And no one, not even the stars themselves, could stand in their way.